a lot easier job. So I appreciate us being able to get that type of equipment. Any other questions from council?
No.
Any public comment on this matter? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. We have received no written comments on this item, and I see no hands raised in the audience.
All right, very good. I will close public comment. We'll return to City Council for further discussion, desired action.
Well, if no one else has any comments, I'll make a motion. Let's see. That here we go. Oh, there are 3 separate resolutions, aren't there? Okay.
Nice.
Well, I'm going to skip the brush chipper and aerial bucket and scramble to the second one. Or better yet, make a motion that we approve. Jesus, okay. I guess it's resolution 2021, next in order, a resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon approving the purchase of a Vermeer. Oh, crap. All right. I'm going to let somebody else take over because I'm not able to find the resolutions that quickly. Or
which ones are we not including?
The first 2, apparently.
The first 2.
So the Ford F-550 truck and the Vermeer bush chipper, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So I'm going to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2021, next in order, a resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon approving the purchase of a CAT 259D3 compact track loader in the amount of $68,919.02.
Second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albudamas?
Yes.
Councilmember Oro?
Yes.
Councilmember Washington?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Joseph?
Yes.
Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
I'm going to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2021, a resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon approving the purchase of a Vector 2100 IVAT truck in the amount of $495,117.09.
I'll second that.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albudamas?
Yes.
Councilmember Oro?
Yes.
Councilmember Washington?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Joseph?
Yes.
Mayor Garcia?
Yes. Thank you.
And we're buying the Ditch Witch too?
Yeah.
Make a motion of the to adopt resolution number 2021, a resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon approving the purchase of the Ditch Witch HX50 vacuum excavator in the amount of $109,061.67.
I'll second that.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albudamas?
Yes.
Councilmember Oro?
Yes.
Councilmember Washington?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Joseph?
Yes.
Mayor Garcia?
Yes. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Concludes our work on this portion of the agenda. Next would be item number 4, Citywide 5-year financial forecast model.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, as we bring on Finance Director Lincoln Bogard for this item. Previously, Lincoln and the team presented to the Finance Committee a month or so ago. This item is a presentation around some new software and some more detailed analysis about the city's financial future. And we're particularly pleased with the ability of, although it is just a spreadsheet, it is a much more detailed spreadsheet than the forecasting we've used in the past. So, Teresa, if you wouldn't mind bringing Lincoln over when you have a moment. We're particularly pleased with the level of, we'll call it detail, but also malleability of this spreadsheet. So it's really a series of spreadsheets, and the assumptions that we can kind of play with and to talk about different future options and future outcomes allows Lincoln and the team to really get a sense of the different scenarios that may be out there. So really pleased with all the hard work that the team put in to get this. It's something that the council has been asking for, for a while. In our past, our budget assumptions, our assumptions about the city's financial future in the budget were more straight line projections. They didn't include as much detail or as much kind of malleability, like I mentioned. But now this tool will allow us to improvise different assumptions or play out scenarios about recessions or changes in markets or the addition of different revenues. And so it really gives us an opportunity to do that. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Lincoln for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hawley. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would also like to mention that last week we approved the purchase of the OpenGov budgeting and transparency platform, which should allow us to, again, achieve another leap and bound above the presentation that we have right now. But with that, I'll share a presentation that goes over the citywide 5-year forecast at this time. So today's objectives, I'd like to review the currently estimated year-end results for fiscal year 2020-2021. These results are prior to the ending of the accrual period. So there are adjusting entries, government-wide conversions, internal service fund eliminations, and things of those nature that have not been done yet. So this is preliminary results for fiscal year end. The estimates that we had for expected accruals at the time of the calculation are included. So we tried to get it as close to expected ending results as we could. Also, this week we're working on estimates for accruals for unearned versus unavailable revenue. Unearned revenue is revenue that's collected prior to August 31st. And if we don't collect it before August 31st and it is relevant to last year, it is unavailable. So that's just, it changes it from a different classification. And then we are using the current estimates and historical data combined with assumptions for the future economic outlook that we have received from consultants that the city utilizes, as well as changes that are projected and or known to be coming within American Canyon over the coming years in this forecast. So the 2020-2021 estimated actuals, the general fund is looking to have a net income of just over $1 million when including developer deposits. Special revenue funds closer to 2.5 million. Capital projects, about 650,000. And then the enterprise funds all combined at about 860,000. And the ISFs, we planned to use some net position this year, so they have a net loss of 300,000 for a citywide total of a net income of 4.8 million. There were some budgeted areas of uncertainty, and those did make a difference. So the COVID-19 pandemic impact was not as severe as originally estimated. For revenues, that meant that property and sales tax actually performed above our expectations, whereas transient occupancy tax and card room did experience severe declines. And we did project some of that, but it was, with the card room shut for a good portion of the year, that did have a large impact. On the expenditure side, we did citywide cuts, including furloughs, to address expected declines in revenues. And at the end of the year, both our revenues and expenditures came in below our overall budget for the year. The general fund, Fund 100, which is our operating fund, has an estimated net income currently around $856,000. Of that, revenues were about $238,000 below the budget, and expenditures were $1,079,000 below budget. The expenditure shortfall or savings that we obtained, 437 was from a savings from refinancing City Hall. The 274,000 was professional services savings, primarily or from two contracts, Coastland and Stinson. Those projects did not finish during the fiscal year, and those costs will likely be incurred in this fiscal year. And then we also had 149,000 in water utility cost savings. And that was for watering at the parks by utilities and maintenance. So that use of less water had a savings as well. Between those three items, we completely identify the net income shortfall or the net income that we received for the year, not the shortfall. But those three items make up the full amount. For the general fund, Fund 105, which is for developer projects, there's an estimated net income expected of $256,000. Revenues were $214,000 above amended budget, and expenditures were $214,000, and expenditures were $90,000 above amended budget. And there was an approval for a budget change for those. So it's actually, both of those are reduced by the $90,000. So expenditures would be at budget and revenues would be over 124. So this slide may look familiar, the general fund performance. As you can see, we had a larger estimated net income for this year than I anticipated. We anticipated to come in near break even, and with the adopted budget, we expect that to approach closer to break even during this fiscal year. So the revenue analysis for the general funds combined for this last fiscal year, property tax are estimated about $378,000 short of the budget. That's the amended budget. We did have a final property tax payment come in, so that number may change. Sales tax results came in about 5% over the amended budget at $129,000 over. Transient occupancy tax was about 17% below expectations, and other taxes were actually over our amended budget by 10%, primarily because we didn't anticipate the card room reopening during the fiscal year, during the mid-year budget process. And overall revenues are estimated about $24,000 below the amended budget, or 0.1%. This is a graphical representation. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it gives an idea of the estimated actuals for 2021 versus the 2021 budget. On the expenditure side, the personnel costs were in line with the amended budget. Supplies and services were about 16% below budget. And that includes the contractual, the professional services contracts for Coastland and Stinson that will be done during this fiscal year, as well as some other contracts that were smaller that were carried over as well. Debt service, 89% below the amended budget, and that was due to the refinancing at City Hall. Utilities and maintenance had the 149 savings from parks irrigation, and overall expenditures were 4.7% below budget, or 990,000. So again, this is a graphical representation of what we discussed, and the amended, we thought we would have about 146,000, so we did better by about 850,000 above what we expected, 860, which was all made up by those 3 line items. Getting into the 5-year forecasting model, the assumptions that we used, we projected an economic slowdown starting in fiscal year 2022-23 with a moderated recovery approximately 2 to 3 years later. This was as a result of the expected end of pandemic relief programs for evictions and foreclosures and other programs that offer relief during the COVID pandemic. We thought that it would take some time for those to flow through to some of the revenue streams for the City of American Canyon. And this may be a worst case scenario, but we did budget or assume a slowdown. However, we did also make an assumption about the new hotels expected in American Canyon to bring higher transient occupancy tax and tourism business improvement district revenues. The hotels, we didn't budget for them to go to full occupancy, but a steady growth over the coming 4 to 5 years with a leveling off to more of a consumer price index growth after that. Also, we made an assumption based on the expansion of the number of card room tables at authorizing that are authorized for gaming that would increase revenues more significantly in the short term, and then also taking into consideration a slowdown after that. We also made no assumption for any furloughs, and we did project step and cost of living adjustments as if the staffing were to stay the same as it is this fiscal year. So that doesn't include adding or removing any staff. The sheriff contract assumes continued historical cost percent increase year to year, and water purchase costs are expected to increase each year. I believe the percent was 5% per year over the next 5 years. Our methodology, we uploaded historical data from fiscal 2018 through current estimates for 2021 and the adopted budget for this fiscal year. We analyzed long-term trends from fiscal 10 through current to obtain average and median growth. We obtained consultant data for property and sales tax and overall economic outlook, and modeled revenue and expenditure by categories, and established assumptions at the category level based on a combination of all of the factors above. So for the general fund, I know this is a little small. I have a spreadsheet I can share at the end if it would help. But we the peak on the upper left is the estimates for this past fiscal year. And as you can see, the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures stays fairly stable with a slight decline over the next 5 years under the estimate that we did. And that's based on the revenues and expenditures. The general fund overall, we show a slight widening for a couple of years and then a narrowing for the following years after that, because of the estimated mild slowdown. Property tax, we had a fairly steady increase. We did slow them down a little bit after next fiscal year. They always lag a year behind, so our assessed values in January of this coming year will be for the following year. So there's another year beyond that before we may see an impact from that. Sales tax is projected to grow by about 100,000 per year over the next 5 years, according to our consultants. So, as I mentioned, the projections that we assumed for this state that we're going to hold our FTE steady over the next 5 years. So if you look at FTE to 1,000 people, before the pandemic in 2019 actuals, we had about 4.27, 4.28 employees per 1,000 residents. And are right now at the end of 2021, we're looking at about 3.79. So, and if we hold that steady with the population increase that is expected, that would reduce to just under 3.7 employees per 1,000 population. And the FTE breakdown is below. The different colors show the makeup of the employees by department. So the model that we are currently using has some scenario modeling capabilities. The unfavorable revenue scenario is basically a 5% reduction in revenues, and that would make a difference. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to show the unfavorable revenue only starting in the projected years. So the fund balance graphic below, it does show a downward trend. However, it would not necessarily be that negative that quick. And that's based on the same expenditure level, but lower revenues. The next scenario is a favorable revenue scenario. And that was a 2% growth in revenues above expected. And the dotted line in the lower graph is the fund balance as it would be under our regular scenario, and the increase is the bars. So if we do 2% by revenues and hold our expenditures where we've projected, it's favorable to a fairly major extent. So I did perform citywide analysis, and we do have citywide forecasts that predict near break-even results over the next 5 years with minor adjustments to expenses based on economic factors. The enterprise rate study and updated 5-year capital improvement plan are not considered in the assumptions yet because those are in process. And the modeling results are similar to the general fund, can be presented to council at this time if you'd like to look at any funds in particular or have questions or want to see how that information is obtained. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Looks like we're in very good financial straits, so that's good. Was not what we anticipated when COVID began, and I just credit staff with their very careful diligence in finding out how to make the books balance better. So thank you. Any comment from council or questions? Vice Mayor Joseph?
Yes, first of all, Lincoln, thank you for the report. And I appreciate it, and I appreciate the analysis that goes into it. I realize there's a lot of what ifs out there, and it might be interesting to see if you can plug in, what happens if Watson Ranch takes off, faster versus slower. We have some projects on Oat Hill and on the 29 corridor. If there's a way to try to do kind of a what if analysis of saying, hey, we know these are 3 or 4 things that are out there. Even if we just wanted to know, if we're being asked to consider another hotel, what do we think that's going to generate in terms of revenues versus expenses, so that we can say, hey, this is going to make us money or break even or whatever. So the first question is, can this model allow for that, or looking forward, is the OpenGov model going to be able to do that as well or better?
The short answer is this model, it would be difficult to project. However, I did, in my modeling with the forecast that we were provided by HDL for property tax, I did assume about a 60-40 coming online of Watson Ranch over the next 2 years. So that is included in our baseline projection at the expected coming online of properties. As far as being flexible, the model is more based on percentages. So I had to find a percentage that fit close to my projection that I had calculated in numbers to make it fit. As far as transient occupancy tax, we do have a consultant that helps with that. However, we have not had them analyze the impact of having 3 to 4 new hotels potentially coming online over the next 3 to 4 years. So that is something that we can work with them on. And the OpenGov should be much more flexible in populating those types of scenarios into the modeling.
Okay, well, thank you. The other comment is, the capital set aside, the deferred maintenance that's going on. I know the 5-year capital plan starts getting us there, but I really do think we need to do an analysis that says, how much money should we be setting aside to be able to take care of our streets and parks and other major facilities, so that money is there when we need it. And my guess is that's going to be a pretty sizable dollar amount. And therefore, we need to plug that in sooner rather than later, so that we have a better sense that things may not be as rosy because we aren't covering that deferred maintenance cost. So, I've said it a million times. I'll just say it again. We've got to identify that number. We've got to plug it into our analysis so that we know whether or not we're really in as good a shape as we think we are.
Certainly. And as a part of the 5-year capital improvement plan process, we have been conducting meetings. We're actually also, as a part of the enterprise rate studies, putting together 10-year projections on CIP for all the enterprise funds. We've also gone through the process of outlining dedicated revenue sources that we receive from external funding for a lot of the projects. As we identify a full list of capital improvement projects, the costs associated with them, and the revenues that are available to fund that, we can obtain that funding gap and we can plan ahead for it. But that will be coming as a part of the 5-year CIP process. We should have a much better figure and idea of the scope and scale by the time we bring that to council, hopefully in January.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Any other questions from council? Council ready for
Lincoln's
public comment?
report was thorough. Thank you.
I'm sorry, say again, please.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think Lincoln's report was very thorough. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions ready for public comment? Seeing no objections, do we have any public comment on this matter?
We have no written comments and I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I will close public comment. We'll return to council for any further discussion with third action.
No?
Move the file. Yes, is that what we're doing here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing.
Mhm. Okay, so
I don't think there's
There's
any.
no action
formal-
item.
no action, it's just more of a informational piece, I think.
Correct, Mayor.
Correct, yes. Okay, with that being said, we'll move on to our next item, which would be, we want to move the item number 6 up. Enterprise fund loan transfers and repayment schedules.
Because this is finance night, I'll go ahead and
Yes, it is.
leave Lincoln up there and let him take this item as well. Thank you, Lincoln.
All right, to continue, we'll be talking about interfund loans for the next few minutes. I have tried to create something that is not too boring. I know I probably have you all in tears right about now. Our objectives tonight is to discuss the proposed transfer of existing interfund loans for recycled water capital assets, to discuss the establishment of a proposed new interfund loan for recycled water, a capital asset cost overrun that was not included in the previous transfers or the previous loans that were established at the time of the capital asset. To discuss a proposal to set all interfund loan interest rates to the local agency investment fund quarterly rate of return. So when the city invests its money in LAIF, we obtain a return, and we would like to set all interfund loans to that rate. And then to discuss proposed repayment schedules for all existing interfund loans. So we have 6 interfund loans, I believe, or 5, and we're proposing a 6th. The first interfund loan was from the Water Operations Fund, and the money was provided to the Water Capacity Fee Fund. And the purpose of that money was for dry year water rights from the Yuba Accord in 2008. The useful life is undeterminable based on the fact that it is a dry year water right agreement. So it's not something that we use every year. The amount of the interfund loan was $1 million. And there's also current accrued interest of $124,027. No repayment has occurred on this loan, and we are setting a anticipated repayment schedule of 10 years beginning next fiscal year. It will be budgeted. It will be at $100,000 per year plus interest each year. And the current rate is LAIF and the proposed rate is LAIF. Interfund loan number 2 was from the Wastewater Capacity Fee Fund to the Wastewater Operations Fund. The purpose was to cover $200,000 in operating deficits in 2008, plus just over $1 million for electrical repairs on a capital asset, $50,000 for minor system repairs, and $30,000 for basin reeducation. I'm not sure what that is, but that's what I found. The last 3 items are all capital assets. The useful lives are various. Some have 0, some are up to 30 based on the underlying asset. However, the assets were already had already started their useful life. So we assumed a 10-year repayment beginning in fiscal year 2022-23, our next fiscal year. The amount is currently 1.285 million 600 plus current accrued interest of 137,914. No repayments have occurred to date, and the budget will be for 128,560 plus accrued interest each year. And the current rate is LAIF, and the proposed rate is the same. For interfund loan number 3, it was originally a loan from the wastewater capacity fee fund to the water operations fund for the construction of the Green Island Road recycled water line project. Since the creation of the recycled water operations fund, we are requesting to transfer this interfund loan to be repaid by the recycled water operations fund to the wastewater capacity fee fund. The useful life on the Green Island Road recycled water line project is 30 years. The amount of the interfund loaned in 2009 was $1,070, and accrued interest is $361,125. We've assumed a 15-year repayment schedule beginning in fiscal year 2025-26 at $71,333 per year plus interest. And the reason why we're assuming a repayment starting in 25-26 is to allow the rate study for the recycled water enterprise fund to be completed and for capital reserves to be built over the following 3 years so that repayment of the 3 interfund loans is not unachievable. Also, we set it there because a 15-year life at that point is the longest that it can be based on the useful life of the underlying asset. The current rate established under the original resolution was 3% per year, simple interest. We are proposing to change that to LAIF. Interfund loan number 4 is very similar to the previous one from the wastewater capacity fee fund, originally to the water operations fund, now being assumed by the recycled water operations fund. And that was a loan that was to construct the recycled water pump station upgrade. It also had a useful life of 30 years. It is currently $304,614 in principal plus accrued interest of $102,807. Same repayment structure as the previous interfund loan, beginning in 25-26 at $20,308 per year plus interest. It also currently has a rate of 3%, and we're proposing changing it to LAIF. Interfund loan number 5, same as the last 2, to be assumed by recycled water to wastewater capacity fee fund for various CIP projects. There's a big list, so I didn't list them all here, but all of the underlying assets have 30-year useful lives. The amount of that interfund loan at inception in 2009 was $3,532,410. There is currently accrued interest of $1,192,186 on this interfund loan. The repayment is 11 years, beginning in fiscal 25-26, which is $321,128 per year, plus interest. However, we've capped interest repayment at $500,000 per year so that it doesn't grow too much. So there will be approximately 3 or 4 years where interest payments will be higher than ongoing after that. The current rate, again, is 3%. We would like to propose changing that to LAIF. Again, all of the proposed rate changes would be effective this fiscal year, so as of July 1st. And interfund loan number 6 is the new requested interfund loan from water operations to recycled water operations. And it is a cost overrun from the Green Island Road recycled water line project, which was interfund loan number 3. It overran costs by $128,189. And so we would like to establish a new interfund loan in that amount with a 15-year repayment based on the same terms of the underlying interfund loan number 3 at $8,546 per year plus interest, starting in 25-26, and the proposed rate would be LAIF. So our requested actions today are to adopt a resolution to transfer the interfund loans for the recycled water capital assets, to establish a new interfund loan for the cost overrun on interfund loan number 3, to set all interfund loan interest rates to the LAIF quarterly rate of return, and to establish repayment schedules for all existing interfund loans. And that is it on this one.
Well, thank you for the report. Good to see we're getting on the repayment schedule on some of these items that have been outstanding for quite a while. Of course, for those who are maybe tuned in, those are internal funds. They're not going outside, if I understand it. Vice Mayor Joseph.
Yes, well, first of all, I thought it was interesting. So just to, even though I suspect it's because I'm into numbers, but more specifically on the interest rates for those 3 older loans, because they are internal loans, as the mayor pointed out, it's not like the borrower or the person who lent us the money is going to argue. I would like to ask whether or not we can redefine the interest rates back to the LAIF rate and go back and recalibrate it, because I think, you know, there's really no point in the wastewater capacity fund, for example, getting, you know, 1 or 2 percentage points more interest earnings than they otherwise would have if that money was sitting in their account, because it's at the expense of a recycled water fund that is a brand new fund and doesn't have a whole lot of cash to work with. So I'd like to suggest, unless it's legally inappropriate, to add to that resolution and say, look, we're going to recalculate all the loans back to their inception at the LAIF rate rather than 3%, despite the resolution that set it at 3. So I'm kind of asking for direction from our city attorney to say, okay, how, if the council wanted to do that, what would we have to do to make it legal? So.
Well, the direction would be to return with a, to modify the resolution as needed. We'd have to confirm, and I'd work with Lincoln on this, on confirming how that could be done within the confines of the statutory framework to make sure that that's handled accurately. So the direction could be to approve in order to approve with, modifications as to the rate.
Okay, thank you. The only other comment, were there any funds that, in one fund, the wastewater capacity fee gets money, and then in another one it owes that same fund? Was there any opportunity to zero out some numbers just to speed the process up?
Not exactly, no. No, that was as close as I could get to a zero-sum game.
All right. Well, like I said, other than the interest rate, I think it's good that we're addressing, like the mayor said, these have been around for over 10 years. I think our auditors have given us, funny looks for the last 5 or 6 years wanting to see this resolved. So congratulations for tackling it.
Any other questions from council? Council ready for public comment on the matter? Seeing no objection, hearing no objection. Do we have any public comment?
We have no written comments received and no hands raised in our audience.
Okay. With that being said, I will close public comment. We'll return to council for further discussion, desired action. I believe there's a resolution to that effect.
Okay, well, if nobody's making a motion, I will make the motion to adopt resolution number 2021, next in order. A resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon to approve the transfer of interfund loans from the Wastewater Capacity Fee Fund to the Water Operations Fund, provided for recycled water capital assets to be prepaid by the Recycled Water Operations Fund, to create a new interfund loan from the Water Operations Fund to the Recycled Water Operations Fund, to update interfund interest rates, and to establish interfund loan repayment schedules for all interfund loans.
And I would second that if the maker would acknowledge some language about adjusting the interest rates back to life, to recalibrate the interest rates to save our recycled fund a few bucks.
Do I need to state that as a stated? Do I need to restate that in a way?
No, I think that's sufficient. To add on that the staff will recalculate to the best available rates.
And, okay, the staff will recalculate to the best available rates per the site.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Abu-Damas.
Yes.
Councilmember Oro.
Yes.
Councilmember Washington.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, council. Moving on in our agenda this evening, we have next up, it was item number 5, American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA, Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, usage strategy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think, Lincoln, we have a presentation also to share with this.
I do. I have my intro in a presentation if you want to see it that way. But then I also have a presentation for you to.
Why don't we just bring up the presentation for my part of this, and then you can just kind of kick off the discussion. So it's kind of a two-parter here for the council. Lincoln's going to describe some more mechanics of how we want to classify these funds, and then I'm going to kind of kick off this conversation about, how should we be thinking about this one-time funding. So maybe, Lincoln, if you share the presentation that's for me, and then talk about the first part.
Sure. So tonight we'd like to review the strategies for the use of the American Rescue Plan Act funding of $4.9 million. $2.45 million was received on July 13th, 2021. And it was for, as of fiscal year 2020-2021. And then we will have another receipt coming for another $2.45 million next July that needs to be budgeted for this fiscal year. We need to discuss allowable uses under the revenue loss versus standard alternatives, and to obtain feedback and direction from council on preferred uses of funds for staff to conduct analysis and return with findings. There are several eligible uses of funds. One is to support public health expenditures. This is similar to the original coronavirus relief fund funding that we received. There's also addressing negative impact caused by the public health emergency. And then replace lost public sector revenue. This area may be the best way for us to bring it in, because we do qualify to bring in all of our funding under replacing lost public sector revenue right now. Another option is to provide premium pay for essential workers, and then to invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Within the replacement of lost public sector revenue, there are more categories that you can use to fund operations with, and City Manager Holly will be going into that shortly. One last thing I would say, the eligibility dates, the cost must be incurred between March 3rd of 2021 and December 31st, 2024. And they must be spent, all the money must be spent by December 31st, 2026. So we have to at least have budgeted for the spending of it by 2024 if it's capital project or something. It still must be spent by the end of calendar year 2026. And with that,
Yeah, go ahead and share that presentation, Lincoln. And really what Lincoln was kind of summarizing, and the staff report hits on it, there's a bunch of different categories. We could classify these funds, but for a city in our position, we don't have a health department. We didn't have a massive vaccine clinic with millions of patients in a county hospital or something like that. So for a city of our position, the most flexible use of funding is really category 3. And staff's recommendation is that's how we classify it. And the resolution that's in the packet is really the budget, the changes to the budget to recognize those revenues. And so we're going to recognize those revenues, classify them as category 3, and have the broadest category for use. And as we begin to talk about use, that's where we get into this philosophy. And the staff report kind of outlines 4 questions. Thank you, Lincoln. And we wanted to go through these questions from a philosophical perspective rather than just jump into do this project, do that project, et cetera, et cetera. We really felt like we should examine the thought process. And so those questions, at least how staff was looking at this, was, and all of these are a spectrum. There's not a black and white necessarily. It's, a range of possibilities. So should we fund multiple small projects or a few larger ones, or just a single large one, right? There's a spectrum there, small, multiple small or a few large. Should we fund deferred maintenance or new capital projects? Again, this spectrum of where, are we looking at it for existing assets or creating new assets? Third question, relates to the funding of projects, if not but for the ARPA funding. The ARPA legislation really focuses quite heavily on utilities and utility projects, even though most jurisdictions did not see decreases to their utility funds, their enterprise funds. Where they saw decreases and might need help from this funding is actually in their general fund. So, the city saw a reduction in our general fund. We did not see a reduction in our enterprise funds, even though this legislation was sort of geared towards utility projects if you look real plainly at it. So it becomes the question, should we be funding projects in our utility area for which there is ordinary funds available, enterprise funds already? Or should we be looking at non-utility projects, a little bit different than maybe what ARPA was intended for out of the general fund, but still permissible? And that's what the broad category number 3 allows. So again, a third question, should we look at projects that are more intentional around what the ARPA funding was for on the utility side, or non-utility projects or where the general fund loss was? And lastly, how do we think about potential projects in the terms of return on investment, whether it be community return on investment, less tangible, smiling faces, that sort of return on investment, or financial return on investment, meaning spending this money and then getting additional benefit from a financial side when a project then generates additional income. Or should we be just looking at it as a one-time benefit, something that may not provide any kind of return on investment, or at least not a financial one? Again, something that the community wants and may have nothing to do with return on investment, but is something that the community wants. And I think lastly, the overlay that I think we ought to be looking at here in this discussion is this really needs to be, what we've heard about and what we're seeing in the community. It isn't what Jason's good ideas are, or Lincoln's good ideas, or Felix or Erica's, or any of the council's good ideas, but it should really be, what are we hearing in the community? And what are we hearing from the constituents that the council is engaging with, and really trying to make sure we have that elevated focus. Staff could go out tomorrow and figure out 10 ways to spend this money, but what are we hearing in the community as far as the desire, around this? So we wanted to have this conversation. There's no action related to the uses. This was the primer for a conversation, and we're looking for some council direction. Next slide, please, Lincoln. So as we go through this first conversation, this first question, multiple small projects or few larger projects, wanted to share some examples, right? What might be some example large projects? We've talked about courtyard relocation in Clark Ranch, municipal broadband, industrial pretreatment at the water reclamation facility. All of those projects, on the left-hand side are all, big projects. Maybe you pick one or two with the amount of money that we'll be receiving, but those are example large projects. Example small projects might be replacing playground equipment at parks, upgrades in our cyber IT financial systems, city council AV upgrades, and using this as seed money, matching funds for large projects, that sort of thing. Moving on to the next slide, please, Lincoln. I'm talking about examples of deferred maintenance or new capital projects. I can see we have a slightly older version of this PowerPoint, but that's okay. The examples of deferred maintenance in the Rio Del Mar neighborhood, for example, replacing the neighborhood utilities out there. That's kind of an example of deferred maintenance. Replacing playground equipment. Again, cyber upgrades, which are not necessarily deferred maintenance, but those are the kind of things everybody's computer only, is as new as a 5-year-old system. And after that, it's old in computer world. So, and again, upgrades in the council chambers. So, those are areas of deferred maintenance versus new projects. Again, you'll notice some from the familiar names, but these are through a different lens. Courtyard relocation, Clark Ranch, broadband, frontage improvements on the highway. Those are all examples of new things versus deferred maintenance. Number 3, please, Lincoln. Utility projects versus general fund projects. Some using these same examples, but through a different lens, utility versus non-utility. A utility, municipal broadband, water reclamation, water projects, replacing old utility pipes, water conservation. Those would all be your classic utility projects. Non-general fund projects, more related to the courtyard, playground equipment, cyber IT, Clark Ranch, frontage improvements, playground equipment. Again, more of your general fund type projects. Lastly, next slide, please, Lincoln. Again, the same list of projects, but through a different lens. Return on investment, not a return on investment. Water conservation projects have a return on investment in the sense that would reduce water fund expenditures. Municipal broadband could increase general fund and property tax revenue from economic development. Pretreatment could increase water fund revenue. The water pressure zone could increase TOT revenue related to Watson Ranch. Frontage improvements could increase property tax related to economic development. On the flip side, the more one-time benefit, not necessarily seeing a return on investment from courtyard relocation or replacing playground equipment or some of those other items, but those are areas that still have merit, obviously, and still are part of a community desire, but in and of themselves, there's not necessarily a return on investment that you might identify. But for example, Clark Ranch would put a lot of smile on people's faces. So there's some merit into that return on investment, even if it's not financial. And you could say the same thing about replacing the old utilities, particularly if that resulted in being able to leverage additional funding like Measure T for street repairs, for example, would also, again, put some smile on folks' faces. So there's that sort of one-time benefit that is meritorious and deserves consideration. So we wanted to view all of these example projects, and there are others. This isn't the total list of what could be useful or funded. But we wanted to kind of carve these up as classic examples and run them through the different lenses of these questions. I think that's the last slide, Lincoln. Yes, it is. And really trying to prime this conversation for the council. And if we need to put those slides back up, we could. Otherwise, happy to entertain comments or questions from the council.
Thank you for the presentation. A lot of options, more options than we have. It's fun to manage all of them. And I think depending on where you're coming from, some have higher importance than others. So it's going to be a challenge to work our way through this. I think I would look at how do we maximize the benefit and the greatest area of need. That's not necessarily all continuing financial benefit from it. Could be a one-time effort as well. And we have in our class setting up our priorities, look at where things we find are important to us to monitor within the city. Certainly parks come up. Some of the equipment that we approved for this evening, and we will look at again in the future, will have something to do with that effort as well. So, questions from comments from council at this point? Want to take public comment? So I think that would be valuable at this point.
We'll see if there's public comment out there. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
We have no written comments, and I see no hands raised in the audience.
All right.
All right, so Mr. Hawley, I think you kind of just want to hear what we have to say.
Right.
I feel like I want to talk about my feelings right now. I have a windfall of what could happen here. Listen, I think obviously all of the possibilities are good here, and we can apply it that way. And as I read through the packet and I thought about the possibility of using these things, and I went through the list of, kickstart Clark Ranch, or use the money for a longer term project that is really infrastructure that is, with all due respect to public works, like a water project is kind of boring for the rest of the public, but it's really important. And then I tried to think about how could this be applied for what it was worth for what it was started for, which is basically COVID, right? A response to the COVID response, and how to invest in communities in case we come through this in the future. And, never letting a crisis become get away without being an opportunity. I was like, I've been pushing municipal broadband for a few years, and this could kickstart a possibility for that. And the reason why I say that is because online learning was a big deal, and there was families out there that did not have the same sort of access that I may enjoy in my home, which is a higher speed, higher cost kind of internet. And what if we could take that, apply municipal broadband to the community like other communities have, and bring those rates down from from like $100 a month for folks that want decent broadband to $9.99. I've sent the council some information in the past about possibilities of this, and longer term that will play out and come back in spades towards this community, because we will be one of the fastest connected sort of community probably in the North Bay. And really have a modernized infrastructure, attracting people, attracting jobs, serving our citizens, lowering costs for them, things of that nature. And so that was what came through on my mind. And but then at the same time, that's sort of, I believe, I don't know the cost on that. I've only seen some of the benefits of it. So it might take a while. But then, weighing some of the smaller things, the quick and easy things that we could do, improving some of our parks or kickstarting some of our parks. That's kind of how I was thinking about it, trying to weigh it towards applying it towards, this money was given to us for COVID reasons. We'll apply it towards something like that.
I would mention one thing about the broadband. To use the funds according to the guidelines, the current upload speeds need to be, or the current download speeds need to be lower than 25 on average, or at least in targeted lower income neighborhoods that can be quantified. And the upload speeds have to be 3 megabits per second or less. As I go through the final guidance that was recently established, I can definitely look at the feasibility of using it under revenue loss and if that changes those requirements at all.
Right. So if it is under those parameters, I think it'd probably be in our lower income homes, and what's available to them, or it could be they wrote that because maybe people are in rural areas where broadband is not as widely adopted. So, that may not be something. Now I'm going to start thinking about something else. I think I did read that, and I was trying to look past that, Lincoln. So thanks for bringing that up.
Sorry.
I think one thing with it was maybe another look at how city operations were impacted by COVID, and to be able to bring it back to a level of where we were prior. Was there loss of funding that impacted that? Was was our capacity constrained because of finances for a certain level of operation that we wanted to achieve on a regular basis? That might be one way of looking at it. Did we encounter that? Maybe Mr. Hawley?
Really?
I was jumping off mute there. We certainly did I would say most prominently in our park and recreation area. We still don't have the full offering of services that we did pre-pandemic. I think one of the things where staff landed kind of at the outset of this was around the general principle of one-time money for projects versus services or staffing, even though in communities where they saw a larger dip and they had actual layoffs, this money is being used to fund those positions, on a one-time basis with the presumption that their revenues are going to return, their normal revenues are going to return. The City of Napa is one of those examples where, they're going to be using almost all of their money to plug a hole and begin hiring folks again. They're presuming they only needed that money for 1 or 2 fiscal years and that their revenues will come back. And so in our case, our loss in revenue didn't result in any layoffs of employees. We did reduce our part-time employees, and we certainly could use that to bring some of that back. But staff had taken the position that we ought to be thinking of this as one-time money and really focused on the capital side of things. But it certainly would be eligible if we wanted to think of things that way. So just to share where staff was coming from on that.
Well, certainly there's a lot needed for in terms of road repair. And probably some utilities likewise. I know the older parts of town, when they were put in the 1950s, I think the sewer lines were clay tile, and a lot of that's going to need a lot of work. So for a one-time money, that can improve quality of a life in American Canyon, something we considered. Vice Mayor Joseph.
Yes, thank you. Another good presentation. A couple of observations. One, as far as the older utilities in the Rancho area, as I think our city manager pointed out years ago when we were doing the master plans, some of those areas may have an impact on inflow and infiltration, I&I, so that even though it's a one-time investment, if it does reduce some of that excess, stormwater runoff, does help the wastewater plant in the sense that, if it doesn't have to treat as much rainwater, its capacity freed up for something else. So just to make a plug for utility replacements in the older part of town with Measure T for the road repavement, that's a neat project that is utilities, is a critical, road standard, and might actually free up a little capacity on the wastewater plant. So just just a plug there. The other one is, for me, I think the easiest, because I agree with Councilmember Oro, all of these things, you see that list and you say, yeah, I want that and I want that too. So what we may want to do is maybe say, how much do we want to allocate on a percentage basis to say, so much towards a return on investment type expenditures, so much for deferred maintenance, so much for a high profile, exciting project. As you can imagine, I would like to see a lot of money go towards the deferred maintenance to get us caught up. But I'd also love to see some money set aside for Clark Ranch, and maybe in the format of matching grants, so that we can approach the Parks Foundation, for example, and say, okay, we've got X number of dollars that if you can raise money to match it, there you have it, and leverage some of those dollars. And then lastly, on broadband, I think it would be exciting. And maybe what we could do as a first step is carve out some money for a feasibility study, just so that we have a sense of what are we talking about. Are we, maybe we aren't in a position to qualify under this ARPA money, but if it's feasible, and pencils, let's do it as an investment in quality of life and our own service. So I certainly would like to see some money set aside for at least a feasibility study. It may tell us that, this is, too late, everybody else has got it covered, but it would be better to know than to just speculate.
That certainly has significant economic impact as well. In terms of, right now, Green Island Road, we complete that. We're going to have a conduit for fiber optic for, they all needed faster internet access. What's that do when we, with broadband by comparison? What's the next phase in the whole IT world? But good points raised. Councilmember Oro.
Yeah, this is why we have 5 council members here, because I want to agree with Vice Mayor Joseph. He's articulating, I think, how we might approach it, which is, I think staff is hearing us tonight, but we can carve it out a little bit more. What's the best ROI? What are the best sort of nice to haves, like Clark Ranch was mentioned? If we could get that, I think it gets us a little bit closer to giving you stronger direction, I guess. And that's, I think it was helpful in terms of how he carved out a mix of, nice to haves, ROI, and just straight up good investment, I think.
I point out probably the Community and Parks Foundation is interested in the reuse of the old utility yard, so that might be their priority. Oh yes, but certainly worth asking them. I'd be cautionary on it, because sometimes something like that could consume the entire amount we could get. For example, with Clark Ranch, I don't know how many. That's a big number that's going to go into that. Whereas, excuse me, I'd be looking at what impact can we make. Return on investment type analysis on it. If we do a utility area, we have a lot of streets that are very much in need of repair. Certainly that's a good return on investment there. So a lot of discussion to have. We just need more money, that's all.
Well, we do have some money. It's just now we don't know what to do with it.
I know.
Well, I can chime in. I think that's why, number one, a lot of these projects, check off 2 or 3 boxes. So we can get a lot of bang for our buck just picking, 1 or 2. But I do think we should look at some of the money in the form of a matching grant type program with some of our community groups. If there's any of those out there, like I said, the Corp Yard might be a good candidate. Clark Ranch as a good candidate. Others, we may want to renovate some of our older parts of town, which again is a kind of a deferred maintenance thing, as well as replacing utilities that will then last for 50 years. And it's, you don't have to worry about it. So there's a lot, I think, that we can do, and a lot that we can create an overlapping benefit. But you're right. Maybe the first step is to maybe have staff go through and narrow the field of options to, a top 10 list of projects that can check off 2 or 3 boxes that are maybe within the realm of possibility. I mean, building a pre-industrial treatment program may be $10 or $15 million, the way it was described at a prior meeting. So that'd be cool, but may not be practical. So maybe if staff, I think some of the comments have merit. If you can zero down, here's 10 or so projects and some ballpark numbers, it'll be easier for us to say, okay, pick these instead of those.
Well, sure. I think the question again would be, how much can we ask your grant proposal there, partnering up with that, Vice Mayor? That intrigues me a lot.
Yeah.
How much of this can we attach to state money or federal money in terms of grants to come in and take our pot of money, put enough together, and we can do a project? I think one thing I'll need to have is a sense of a cost on some of these options and how we might best approach that.
I see a matrix in your future, Mr. Hawley.
I was going to say I have one right here.
Oh, look at that.
I don't know that Lincoln's being serious, but oh, he was.
Yeah, look at this. Yeah.
Can we make it bigger so we can read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Let me see.
Of course he is. I know we haven't heard either from Councilmembers Abadamos or Councilmember Washington, and would love to get their perspective on some feedback.
Well, I actually, I'm listening to what Councilmember Oral and Vice Mayor Joseph mentioned. I mean, they're all good ideas. I can't argue with none of them. I think the only thing I would want to look at or hear from is, some public comments, but I mean, obviously we don't have any tonight. I'm curious of, what the people of American Canyon, what some of their priorities are. Besides the obvious ones that we mentioned about Clark Ranch, I think everything that we mentioned tonight are on point. I would just like to survey the community a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say I could add a percentage on here if you wanted to each put like what you would propose as a percent or any ideas that you might have to group analyze it. And
So I get however you want to present it to us, right? I mean, I think it's, we need to classify it, large, small, possible matching grant, super expensive, non-expensive, right, kind of thing, whatever you want to do it. If you could put that thinking behind it, it would be helpful.
Could you mail that out to all of us, because I still can't read it, and there's no way you're going to make it large enough on the screen. So
I can do it this way. It just has one at a time.
now I just really want to look at what's in here on the
list.
Yeah, what's the list?
Yeah, we can certainly send that to the council. I know Councilmember Abadamas had some perspectives to share.
I just wanted to add to what Councilmember Washington was saying. Another thing that I would consider looking at, which is actually not on the list, is maybe back pay for our employees for their furloughs. That was a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's something I would want to consider, but I do agree that 1 or 2 large projects is going to be more efficient for us than several small projects, and I would I would lean close, more be aligned with Clark Ranch than Watson Ranch. The reason for that is because Clark Ranch is fully city funded. It's our project, so that's the direction I would go there.
Just a reminder that there are elements of Watson Ranch that the city has agreed to construct and fund.
Right.
And so but that was the reason we had listed it. It is not 100% privately funded.
Right, so maybe I should clarify. Watson Ranch has already started and Clark Ranch is still sitting there. And I would like to see some sort of movement on Clark Ranch ASAP, because we, spent a lot of time developing the specific plan, and we solicited a lot of input from our residents, and we kind of got everyone's hopes up that this super cool park is coming soon, and the students at the school are going to be able to do hands-on learning across the street, and et cetera, et cetera. But the school's built, students are getting ready to start school there, but the park hasn't even started yet. And we didn't have, last time we talked about it, we didn't even have an implementation plan for it or when it would get started. So for me, Clark Ranch is a little bit more pressing just in that respect. Not that Watson Ranch isn't amazing and that I don't love it. I absolutely love it. And I understand that parts of it are city funded, but it's already started. I hope that clarifies.
It does. Are there any other comments or suggestions by the council? Let me ask another question also. In terms of, I heard about the public input. Tonight, I think being an off week and probably not a lot of publicity around this meeting is among the reasons we don't, have much participation tonight. Trying to get a sense of the council of what level of engagement, that you would think is appropriate on this, knowing again that the number of $5 million roughly sounds like a big number, and it is, except when you compare it to the cost of the things that are listed, it's very, very small compared to all those.
Yeah, a whole lot. Yep.
And we talk about, again, Clark Ranch being the example of getting everyone's hopes up. One of my concerns would be getting a lot of people's hopes up about the use of this money and all those potential ideas and not being able to deliver on all of them, obviously. So some sense from the council on what kind of or what level of engagement, additional public meeting or, that sort of thing.
Well, I sorry. Joseph, do you have your hand up, or is it just hanging up for the whole time?
No, I did, but you go ahead. I've talked a lot tonight anyway.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things I don't want to do is if we do a public hearing, maybe it's like a survey or something rather than a public meeting every 2 weeks, and we'll see what we can get maybe through the newsletter, because I don't want to delay the implementation or the budgeting and miss any deadlines here. And that's my biggest fear, because I know sometimes those things can drag out. I think we could do a soft poll of some sort and get enough direction. And then when it comes back again, we can probably promote it and get much more public input at a regular city council meeting, So that's my thoughts.
I agree with it. I think that's a good way to approach it. I think maybe it's a way of breaking down this conversation in terms of areas of interest, what staff have presented tonight, go through a survey with the community and see what their priorities are. And I'll emphasize that this funding is not going to be able to cover everything. Frankly, some of these projects is going to require additional funds on top of what we already have received.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mayor. And to David's point, Councilmember Oro's point about some of the deadlines, if this money only covers a part of a project and we don't have identified where the other funding would come from, we're going to need to be on a fast track to identify that other source of funding, lest we end up not being able to utilize it. So there is an aspect to, I guess I'll call it deliverability, because if we set aside money and we were going to be a local match for something and we never end up figuring out where the main pot of funding is going to be or the time frame for that is outside of the windows for this funding, we could run into some issues there. So
we'll lose the money.
Deliverability is certainly an aspect to it.
Yeah.
If I can, I think these are good points. I would agree with Councilmember Oro. I don't want to spend a lot of time soliciting public input, not because I don't want the public input, but as a practical matter, you're going to get, $20 million worth of ideas. And it's almost unfair to get people talking about what they'd like to see and then say, well, we can't do that, we can't do that. So maybe
it's part of a reality check-in, is it not?
Yeah. So maybe a better approach might be that we provide some direction to staff that they can go back through and kind of narrow the scope of some of the ideas, come up with a top 10 or whatever that seem to have a high public value, checks off a number of boxes, so that and we can provide some direction, particularly along the lines of using some of this money as a match, particularly for Clark Ranch, because I would like to see some investment there. There, theoretically, the 4-H and Spirit Horse, they want to make some improvements. Maybe we can facilitate that as long as those are improvements that are permanent and consistent with our master plan and not just for their own operating benefit. But so I think there's a lot we could do that put together a package that's a little more defined and then bring that to the public to say, hey, what do you think we ought to pick and choose out of this list? That way it's a little more manageable.
I think you get better results that way from the public on that, because I'm hearing comments already. What are we going to do with all this money? How much money do we get? And then there's the reality check-in of what it costs to build something, repair something. Clark Ranch is going to be a huge cost over time. It's not going to get built overnight, as I tried to tell a lot of people. But yeah, we had a lot of public comment around it and participation. Came up with some great ideas. There's an expectation that will move forward. But we don't even have a cost estimate that I'm aware of or can remember what it takes to put that together. I would like to see, I like the approach of getting more specific and narrowing down what does this really mean and to the public, and just have them weigh in on a survey. Take that information. They need to participate in this.
So is there general agreement that for the moment we would hold off on some of the outreach and kind of whittle this down a little bit?
Yeah.
Rather the open-ended question of what do you want? More of we've distilled this down into, maybe a buffet rather than the entire restaurant, and now, go to the buffet and pick a couple entrees, not pick any of the restaurants in town, So,
what do you like on this buffet? Where are your areas of interest? Yeah. Appetizer, main course, dessert. But yeah, it's. I think right now it would get overwhelming. It's kind of hard for me to absorb all of it. I think we all have that problem right now, and I know I can imagine from the staff end of it, it might be pretty similar.
We can spend this money tomorrow. We got some money.
Yeah.
we have our own competition going. So.
That's right.
That's
I'm sure you do.
the spirit we expect from staff.
So, okay. I don't know that there's any feedback. I think we start thinking about some next steps. There is a resolution tonight. So the resolution tonight is a budget item. We need to, staff is recommending we adopt that resolution so that we can classify these funds and get our budget, our paperwork all straightened out. After that, we would go back and find a time to bring this back to council, and what we would kind of bring back to council is a refined list of projects, one that checks multiple boxes, that is, probably more than one or two, but recognizing that maybe it's one or two sort of key things, and then some sort of set asides for some studies or for some smaller carve outs, just kind of maybe one or two big and two sort of smallish set asides for more of the studies. Keeping
You
an eye.
might want to include on that potential for grant funding for it as well. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, leverage opportunities, right?
Leverage opportunities. There you go.
Whether it be, grant funds or, again, combining with ongoing other revenue streams that we know
Right.
we could tap into. Yeah, okay. I heard Councilmember Abadamas bring up the notion of pay for employees. We can certainly go back and calculate some of those concepts if that's the pleasure of the council. Wanted to make that deviates a little bit from the project point, and we certainly can do that and bring that forward as a concept, or just wanted to make sure we had some consensus around that.
I'll probably just be shot now, but what we ended up doing was talking about a furlough, which means employees, we in effect said, we'll pay you your hourly rate, but we're going to pay you for less hours. So the question is, if we reimbursed you for those lost hours, you then would have gotten 20 days of essentially paid leave. And I don't know if that would be our intent. So the beauty of the arrangement is it's better to be furloughed than to just have your pay docked. The flip side is if we get into a situation where we get this kind of money back, it's difficult to reimburse you because you've already gotten something. Maybe you didn't really want the time off, but that was kind of the quid pro quo in making it work. So, I have some reservations about looking at making the employees whole because from a different perspective, they were made whole, just maybe not the way they wanted.
Well, I had that experience at the Vets Home Yountville. I had 3 furlough days a month for 18 months. That's a lot of time off. Well, it accumulates. You can spend some time with family or take a trip, add some vacation time to it, and that's how I utilize mine. So I think that's something to consider.
The one thing I would bring up on this, since council raised it, is it may not be that we're talking of back pay per se, but recognition of the fact that, in particular, some of our field employees and operational employees really have and continue to operate in a unique environment that is different than, quite frankly, what they signed up for. Employees that are more working in the office have different arrangements, and we've done a lot of remote work and that sort of thing. But there are some jobs that you cannot do from home, and these operational employees have had to and continue during this time period to operate in really unique circumstances. And so maybe it's not as much about back pay related to furlough and more recognition, not unlike what was done for the grocery store workers when the council did that pay there. That, again, the grocery store employees didn't have a choice about who came into their store. They had every customer. And it was the same thing with our operational employees. They had to come to work. They had to integrate with the public, with their colleagues in a very, very difficult environment. So just to kind of put that idea out there, that's fraught with some concerns because not every employee had the same circumstance. So there's an employee equity issue that would be looming. But if the council's interested in some of that analysis, we can do it. Or if they're not interested, we won't. I don't want to. Selfishly, that's a different part of the organization who's going to be doing that analysis. And so if we're going to be asking them to do that analysis, I want to make sure that that there's a little bit of consensus around it.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I thought that was what Council Member Abadamas's intentions were when she mentioned more of an appreciation for the employees for living through this and dealing with this. It just shows an appreciation from our side.
Okay.
We're ready for public comment. Hearing no objection, have we received any public comment on this matter?
We have not. I have no written comments and there are no hands raised.
Okay, I will close public comment. And how do we want to direct staff at this point? I think we kind of got enough rough framework here of probably less items to look at, more categorical, probably something with cost potential for leveraging other sources for success and being able to fund it, and a public survey when that is completed.
I think we have enough direction, Mayor. I think we'll come up with the time to bring this back to council, and as I think this through, we'll bring back council this sort of more refined list and say, look, this is what we want to survey the public. We have a not 100% scientific poll, but we want to create a polling for the community, and we want to talk about these areas or these projects, a more refined list than we talked about tonight, and then say the council can say yes, that's the list that we want to hear from the public on, and then we would do that poll after that next council meeting.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we can see how long that takes to get the poll done and gather that information and bring it back to council. And
I envision something like on a priority of a scale of say 1, 2, 3, high, low, middle, or maybe 5. I don't know how you want to. I mean, sometimes that's kind of helpful to see.
Yeah.
I like it, but this is the ranking order I would put it in.
Yeah, kind of ranked choice voting sort of concept.
Right.
If there are some ballpark dollar amounts, you'd have a list with a dollar amount that's going to equal more than the 5 million probably. And so that becomes kind of a target that says there's only 5 million. So pick whatever you want, but when you hit 5, you stop picking. So that's another method of
That would be interesting.
That did cross my mind, Vice Mayor Joseph. I can't commit to being able to pull something off like that. I do think it'd be really instructive and really cool to do. I don't know that we've got the survey tools in our toolkit to be able to, kind of have that informed choice.
I can visualize that happening. Yes. How do you construct that? Yeah.
You can't pick choices that add up to more than what we have, right? So we'll see if that's a possibility. I don't know that our polling abilities will be able to do that.
And, that begs the other question. Do we want to go to the elaborate effort of a survey along those lines? Because, unless we go to a lot of trouble to make sure it's representative, it's going to reflect whoever pays more attention to it. I don't know. Maybe we can talk about that when we get that refined list.
It is always about a matter of who pays attention to it.
Okay.
Look at public comment tonight. Okay, it's an off night. I expect less public comment. You have a regular meeting, who weighs in? People it matters to them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you get results that sometimes are not representative of all the community. And you hear back, well, yeah, but you need to participate in the process if you want to be heard.
Okay. Well, I think it'll be a challenge for staff to come back with that list of options, and we'll figure out how to get public input afterwards.
Yeah.
Conceptually, we'd like to. I'm going to target something before the end of the calendar year, probably that first meeting in December, or perhaps the second meeting. That would leave us some downtime over the holidays to really have the survey open and to gather, 4 to 6 weeks worth of input, and really let people kind of weigh in around that time frame.
Okay. We need a resolution this evening.
We do, yes, around the budget aspects of this.
Okay. Council will want to take care of that.
If no one else, I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2021 next in order, a resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon to increase revenue budgets for FY 2020 to 2021 and FY 2021-22 for receipt of American Rescue Plan Act funds.
I'll second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Abadamas,
Yes.
Councilmember Oro,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Joseph,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on next, we have management staff oral reports. Anything there?
We do not have anything there. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on then, Mayor Council comments, committee reports. After that, future agenda items. I will defer my council report till next meeting. Anybody else want to report in? Councilmember Abadamas. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Anything to report, council report?
I said no, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Washington.
No, I'm submitting mine tomorrow for next council meeting.
Okay. Councilmember Oro.
I know I have something to report, but I don't have it right in front of me right now. So I'll try to put it in a written report for the next council meeting.
Okay. Vice Mayor Joseph.
Ditto for me. I'll get it in tomorrow, I hope.
Okay. Any future agenda items?
I'll wait for next week.
Wait for next week. Okay. With that being said, it's been a very good, productive meeting this evening. A lot of good discussion. We concluded our work and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Bye.
Good night.
Right.
Good night, guys. Good night, American Canyon.
Night.